I walked into my daughter's wedding reception and watched her dance with a man I knew was only there for a paycheck. But she didn't know that I was sitting on a secret worth $9 million that could have changed everything or destroyed it. Before I even sat down, my daughter approached me not with a hug, but with a demand for more money to cover the upgraded, champagne wall she hadn't cleared with me. And in that moment, looking at her entitled glare and her new husband's greedy eyes, I realized that keeping my father's massive inheritance a total secret was the best decision I had ever made in my life. Was I a monster for letting my only child struggle with student loans and a modest wedding while I had millions sitting in a trust? Or was I just a mother protecting herself from being bled dry by the people she loved the most? I need you to listen to the whole story, and tell me if you would have kept that kind of life-changing money a secret from your own flesh and blood, even when they were begging for help. To understand why I did what I did, you have to understand my father, Silas. Silas was a self-made man who started a construction company with nothing but a toolbox and a dream. And by the time he passed away, he had built an empire, but he was also a man who believed that money was a tool that could either build a person's character or rot it from the inside out. I grew up comfortably, but Silas never spoiled me. He made me work in the office during my summers, made me track every penny of my allowance, and he always told me that the moment you let people know you have money is the moment you stop knowing who your friends really are. My daughter, Chloe, was the apple of his eye, but as she grew up, I started to see a streak of entitlement in her that worried both of us, as she was always chasing the newest trends, the most expensive clothes, and looked down on anyone who didn't live a high-end lifestyle. When Silas's health started to decline, he called me into his study and showed me his final will, explaining that he was leaving his properties and the bulk of his liquid assets to me, totaling roughly $9 million after taxes, but he had one specific request. He told me not to tell Chloe about the full amount until she had proven she could handle a normal life, because he feared that a windfall like that would turn her into someone we wouldn't recognize. He passed away 3 years ago, and I followed his wishes to the letter, keeping the money in a diversified portfolio, and continuing to work my mid-level management job as if nothing had changed, living in the same 3-bedroom house and driving the same SUV. Chloe, meanwhile, had met Marcus, a charming but perpetually between jobs, aspiring influencer who talked a big game about his future business ventures, but never actually seemed to earn a dime. From the moment they got engaged, the pressure on me started to mount, as Chloe wanted a wedding that looked like something out of a celebrity magazine. And she assumed that because her grandfather was well off, there must be a massive pot of gold waiting for her. She would come over for dinner and spend the entire night talking about $5,000 wedding dresses and destination bachelorette parties in St. Tropez. And every time I told her that we had to stick to a reasonable budget, she would throw a tantrum, accusing me of being stingy and holding back her inheritance. I paid for a lovely traditional wedding. It cost me $60,000. Which is a fortune by most standards, but to Chloe, it was an insult because it wasn't the 6-figure extravaganza she felt she deserved. Marcus was even worse, constantly dropping hints about how their family needed to start investing in his new digital marketing agency, and how it was a shame that such a successful family lived so modestly. They had no idea that I could have bought their entire apartment building without blinking. But the more they pushed, the more I saw the greed behind their smiles. I remember one specific dinner where the manipulation became unbearable. Marcus spent 40 minutes explaining how a proper mother would want to see her daughter start her life in a gated community, while Chloe just nodded along, looking at me with eyes that were cold and calculating. She started bringing up my father's hidden wealth constantly, claiming she remembered him mentioning a Swiss account or a specific piece of land. And each time I denied it, the atmosphere in the room turned toxic. I watched her scroll through Instagram, showing me pictures of 6-tier cakes and custom-made floral arches that cost more than a year of my salary. And when I gently reminded her that those people were likely in debt, she snapped at me, saying I was just bitter, because I chose to live a boring middle-class life. It hurt deeply because I was the one who had spent years caring for my father in his final days while she was out partying on his dime. Yet she felt she was the one who deserved the reward for his hard labor. Marcus began calling me without Chloe's knowledge, trying to play the role of the concerned son-in-law, telling me that Chloe's mental health was suffering because she felt financially insecure. He had the audacity to suggest that I should sign over the deed to my father's old lake house to them as a wedding gift, so they could at least have some equity. I knew that house meant the world to Silas, and I knew if Marcus got his hands on it, it would be sold to the highest bidder within a month to fund his failing YouTube channel and his designer wardrobe. I felt like I was being hunted by two people I was supposed to be able to trust, and the weight of the $9 million felt like a lead shield I was using to protect myself from their arrows. Things came to a head 2 months before the wedding when Marcus pulled me aside and told me that he had found a perfect house for them, but they needed a $400,000 down payment. And he knew I had the money tucked away somewhere from Silas. When I told him no, that Chloe had a modest trust for a down payment that would cover a normal home but not a mansion, he turned cold, and for the first time, I saw the mask slip. He told me that if I didn't step up, Chloe would realize that I didn't care about her happiness, and that our relationship would never be the same. It was a blatant threat, and it broke my heart to realize that my daughter had chosen a partner who saw her mother as a bank account. I stayed silent, watching them scramble to pay for extras they couldn't afford, watching Chloe take out personal loans just to have a designer veil, and all the while, I felt this heavy weight in my chest, wondering if Silas was right or if I was being cruel. I saw the credit card statements she accidentally left on my kitchen counter. Interest rates that were astronomical, all for the sake of a luxury aesthetic that they couldn't sustain for more than a day. I wanted to scream at her that life isn't a photo shoot, but I knew she wouldn't listen. So, that's where things stood leading up to the big day. With my daughter resenting me for my frugality, and her fiancé plotting ways to get his hands on wealth he didn't even know existed. I was standing in a room full of people, holding a secret that would make all their problems disappear, but I knew deep down it would only create new ones. I looked at the guest list and saw Marcus's friends, a group of equally vapid entrepreneurs, who were already bragging about how Marcus had married into money. It was sickening. Before I tell you the absolute chaos that erupted at the wedding and the legal move I made that changed everything, I want you to pause right here and tell me the truth in the comments. If you had $9 million and saw your child making terrible, greedy life choices, would you give them the money to save them, or would you let them hit rock bottom? I really want to know if you think I'm being a protective mother or a manipulative one. So let me know your thoughts before we get to the ending. The day of the wedding was beautiful, but the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. And as I sat in the front row, I watched Marcus whisper something in Chloe's ear that made her look over at me with a look of pure disdain. During the reception, after the speeches were over, Marcus got a little too much liquid courage in him and decided to make a scene, getting up to give a second unscheduled toast where he publicly thanked everyone for coming, but then made a pointed comment about how some people in the family value their bank accounts more than their children's joy. The room went silent, and Chloe didn't look shocked. She looked like she agreed with him. He went on to talk about how they were going to build an empire, despite the lack of support, and how they would remember who stood by them when they were struggling. It was a public execution of my character. A few minutes later, I went to the restroom and heard them arguing in the hallway, not about their love or their future, but about me. Marcus was telling Chloe that the old woman was clearly hiding the real money Silas left, and that once the wedding was over, they were going to force my hand by cutting off my access to any future grandchildren until I redistributed the wealth. Chloe's response is what killed me. She said, "Don't worry, Marcus, she's obsessed with her reputation. She'll crack once she realizes she's going to be alone." I stood there in that bathroom stall, heart pounding, realizing that my daughter wasn't just being influenced by a bad man. She had become one with him. They weren't mourning Silas. They were waiting for me to die or give in so they could live a life of luxury they hadn't earned. I felt a coldness settle over me that I had never felt before. A resolve that was as hard as the construction sites my father used to manage. That was the moment the thank God part of this story kicks in. The very next morning, while they were probably sleeping off their hangovers and dreaming of mansions, I called my estate lawyer and made a drastic change. I moved the entire $9 million into a strictly controlled charitable foundation that would support trade schools and single mothers, leaving only a small, conditional fund that Chloe could only access if she completed a financial literacy course and stayed married to the same person for 25 years. Or more realistically, a fund she could access if she ever ended up in a domestic crisis or divorced. I essentially made sure that as long as she stayed with Marcus, seeking my wealth, she would get absolutely nothing. I realized that if I left the money to her, Marcus would spend it, and if I left it to her children, Marcus would find a way to control them through it. By moving it to the foundation, I was protecting the legacy Silas worked 50 years to build. 2 weeks later, Marcus came to my house with a business proposal that was really just a demand for $500,000 to pay off their wedding debts and his investments. He had a glossy folder with him, full of fake projections and lies. I sat him down with Chloe present, and I told them the truth, well, part of it. I told them that Silas had indeed left a massive fortune, but that because of the unfortunate lack of family values shown recently, I had donated the vast majority of it to charity in Silas's name. The look of pure, unadulterated horror on Marcus's face was the most satisfying thing I have ever seen. His face turned a shade of purple I didn't know was possible. He actually turned to Chloe and screamed, "You told me she was loaded!" right in front of me. He didn't even try to hide it anymore. He didn't ask about her feelings or the family he claimed to love. He just wanted the cash. The mask didn't just slip, it shattered. Chloe was stunned, looking back and forth between us, finally seeing the man she had married for who he really was. Within 6 months, Marcus filed for divorce when he realized there was no big payday coming, and he even tried to sue me for emotional distress and interference, but my lawyers laughed him out of the room. Chloe came crawling back to my doorstep, crying about how he had drained her small trust fund on marketing expenses and left her with nothing but credit card debt and a broken heart. I didn't give her $1 million then either. I didn't pay off her credit cards with a wave of my hand. I gave her a room in my house, a list of jobs she could apply for, and the phone number of a good therapist. I told her she had to earn her way back to reality. It's been a year, and for the first time in her life, my daughter is learning the value of $1 and the importance of character over couture. She's working as a junior designer, taking the bus to work, and actually helping me cook dinner instead of demanding reservations at the hottest spots. She still doesn't know that I still have enough tucked away in a separate, secret account to ensure her future is safe once she actually grows up and shows me she can be trusted with a legacy, but for now, the poor mother act is the only thing saving her soul. If I had told her about the $9 million on her wedding day, she would still be married to a predator, and would have likely spent half of it on a lifestyle that would have eventually destroyed her. I had to let her lose everything to find herself. I learned that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone you love is the truth they aren't ready to hear, or in my case, a secret they don't deserve to know until they are worthy of it. Like this video if you think I made the right call by keeping the millions a secret and protecting my father's legacy from that gold digger. Subscribe to the channel for more stories about family drama, secret inheritances, and the crazy things people do for money. Don't forget to head down to the comments and share your final thoughts on this whole mess. Did I go too far by donating the money? Or was it the only way to teach her a lesson? I'll be reading your responses, and I'll see you all in the next story.